Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I'm Bernard Schwartz, the director of the 92nd Streetwise Unterberg Poetry Center, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event, the book launch for Speaking of Work, our collaboration with Xerox as part of its project Set the Page Free. That phrase, set the page free, has a special resonance in this concert hall, where for nearly 80 years, the Unterberg Poetry Center has brought writers and readers together as indispensable colleagues, fostering a community where the voices of literature are embraced and amplified. What a thrill it has been to have the unique opportunity, in collaboration with Xerox, to commission new stories from some of our favorite writers and transform that community into a lasting work of art. Set the Page Free also reflects our long-standing commitment to education and access, and it's in that spirit that I'd like to welcome those students in the hall as part of our Christopher Lightfoot Walker Literature Project, which for 30 years has brought thousands of high school students here to the Y to meet with writers prior to their appearance on stage. Earlier this evening, Lee Child met with classes from Hillcrest High School in Queens, Lyons Community School in Brooklyn, and the Richard R. Green High School of Teaching in Manhattan. During classroom visits to prepare the students for their night at the Y, we asked the high schoolers to write about what they envisioned the workplace would be like for them in the year 2032, the perfect starting point for our sequel to Speaking of Work. And now, here to kick things off, please join me in welcoming the CEO of Xerox, Jeff Jacobson.
Good evening. Thank you, Bernard. How's everybody doing out there? All right. It is a great thrill on behalf of everyone here at Xerox to be at the 92nd Street Y. Is this amazing? This is a cultural mecca. As a matter of fact, this was a project, this Set the Page Free project, that was months in the making. And when my team, or our team of Barbara Basney and our Chief Marketing Officer, Tony Clayton-Hine, came to me months and months ago, the way this project started was they first said, Jeff, we want to do something at the 92nd Street Y. Now, I'm a guy that grew up in Flatbush. And then my parents, when I was age 10, thought they were doing me a favor, and they moved up north to this place called the Bronx. And I can tell you, this is not the Y that I'm used to seeing. This is a cultural mecca. It's really amazing. And it's just such an honor to be here with a great history. It's just absolutely phenomenal. But this project, when Tony came to me, you have to realize who I am. One thing you learn early on, great ideas that come from the company typically do not come from the CEO. And Tony came to me, and she knew this was an uphill battle. She said, Jeff, you do read a lot. I said, Tony, I read more than anybody in the world. I read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times business section, Barron's, Forbes, Fortune. She said, I'm in big trouble. But you also learn that when you have great people, you empower them, you let them run like stallions, and they end up doing great things like this. But things are never done alone. They're done with great partnerships. They're done with great people like the 92nd Street Y. They're done with creative geniuses like Y&R, Young and Rubicam. I mean, they truly, Y&R has just taken this to a totally another level for all of us, and they've been a great partner. And we are so proud that this project supports global literacy, the 92nd Street Y, and certainly World Reader. All great causes. So people have asked me, why is Xerox involved in Project Set the Page Free? And it becomes very personal because this 111-year-old company is no longer just the document company. It's no longer just the color company. What we do nowadays is we help our customers connect, communicate, and work more efficiently. We take the physical and the digital, and we bridge them together. And Set the Page Free was probably never embodied more than with the Brother Dominic commercial. Who knows Brother Dominic? So for those who don't, or for those who are younger than me, which are probably a lot of people in this room, Brother Dominic was a very famous commercial in the mid-'70s that was first debuted at the Super Bowl. And Brother Dominic was a monk. And he took days and days and days to write a very complex manuscript. And then he went to his superior monk. And the superior monk said, "Brother Dominic, this is amazing. Now I need 500 more copies." So Brother Dominic, as smart as he was, ran to the bowels of the monastery, where he found his Xerox partner and his Xerox 9200 copy machine. And Brother Dominic came back just an hour later to the superior monk, handed the 500 copies of the manuscript, and the superior monk said, "It's a miracle." Fast forward 40 years later, what a different world we all live in. Brother Dominic took his days to make his first manuscript, came to the superior monk, and now we're in 2017. Superior monk said, "Brother Dominic, this is amazing, but now I need 500 copies. I need it translated into 50 different languages. I need it communicated to the 7 different continents. I need it printed on mugs, on iPads, and on everybody's smartphone." Certainly 1 hour later, Brother Dominic came back, and the superior monk had his iPad up. And Albert in Africa said, "It's a miracle." And he showed the manuscript on a mug, on his iPad. And that's what Set the Page Free is all about. It's bridging the physical and digital. It's helping people communicate, connect much more efficiently than they ever would. It's all about the modern workplace. And what tonight is all about is the culmination of taking 14 people who my beautiful wife would tell you have nothing in common with me because they are literary, musical geniuses. Why are you laughing? But we are so proud of what this book that you will all read and you will all have a copy of, and you've all met some of our literary and musical geniuses who are here tonight. So with no further ado, let me make sure that you get to meet the people who have worked together, who have collaborated to produce this wonderful book, The Speaking of Work. Thank you very much.
This is so festive. Hi, my name is Chip Kidd, and I designed the cover of the book. I will I will be mercifully brief and just take you through the process. So when Bernard Schwartz first contacted me about this project this past summer and asked me to do the cover for it, I was really excited because the talent was amazing and the cause was fantastic. So I asked, "What is the title of the book?" "We don't know," he said. "In designing a cover, this presents a challenge. As someone who has worked for a publisher for over 31 years and counting, I have always received a title with the manuscript before being asked to design the cover. With this, I got part of a manuscript, but no title. And then Bernard asked, 'Do you have any suggestions for the title?' This was even more troubling. Designers are never asked to suggest titles for books, with good reason. Not my job. We just figure out what they look like, not what they say. Unless you want to pay us a lot more money." "No," I said. "And it scares me that you're even asking me that." Silence. Weeks passed. Then, ringing phone, Bernard, "Any cover ideas yet?" "No," I said, "not without a title. Any progress there?" "Not really," he said. "Though all the pieces in the book are about the workplace, both past and present. Does that help?" "Well, sort of, but," "and," he said, "at least we have a subtitle we're considering." "Great. What is it? A tale of love, something, and paper clips. Whew. Thank God. Something to grab onto. I thought that's the key concept, paper clips. No matter what your workplace, office or home, you likely need them. That was the answer. The word work made out of paper clips. It was the only thing that made sense. So I filched a box of paper clips from an office drawer and plopped them onto the scanner, spelling out the word work backwards. Because you have to, because the way the scanner works, then they're going to flip them. And if I have to explain that to you, I'm sad for you. Anyway, once the scan was done and I imported it into Photoshop, this is what I got. Actual applause for this. That's just amazing. Okay. This is what we call in the design trade a juxtaposition of content and form. What does that mean? That is, what this says is contrasted with what it looks like. So when you read it, you make a conceptual leap in your mind. So that was a start. Weeks passed. Then Bernard called to say that the title would likely be Speaking of Work, and I was off to the races, as it were. Of course, with all these wonderful contributors, all their names would have to be on the front, so I just started playing with the typography. This was just a working idea, as it were, playing with the use of typewriter writing. Now, I know that's a cliche, but sometimes you have to try the cliche first so you can see why you have to then discard it. I sent this to Bernard, who liked it a lot, probably because he had never published a book before. But wait, I said, let's add some color. I tend to like primary colors because they are perceived as basic visual building blocks. Thank you, Bauhaus. These were received with enthusiasm, but were decided that they did not fully represent the modern workplace. Okay, fair enough. But everyone liked the paperclips idea, so that helped me to not become sad. Then it came to me like a bolt from the blue. What defines the workplace, whether it's in the office or home or anywhere else? Replication, right? And who's sponsoring this, by the way? Replication, working on something day after day, it's what we all do, something that would apply to all of the participants involved, regardless of where and how they do it. So then it just became, an issue of styling, colors and fonts. I moved the papers on, that's my actual desk, or a little bit of it, as you can see, just to give it a little bit of context. I changed the colors a bit to make them stronger. Red! And so then it just became, now we have to add the names. So we're just going to do that down the side so it's very clear. These are all the amazing people that are in this book. And each of them technically gets a voice, gets a speaking of. Each contributor gets a speaking of line, including the person who's talking right now. So, and that's it. it was done. And I have to thank everybody involved, because they pushed me to do something better than I would have done. And that is what a really terrific workplace does. Whether you're trying to write a song with a collaborator, or you've got a boss who's visually astute, or an author who has an idea that's good. So I want to thank you all. The videos are incredible. Thank you, Young and Rubicam. I was scared about watching mine, and then it popped up by mistake on my Twitter feed yesterday, and I was on the subway and I watched it, and I was like, oh my God. They did an amazing job. So just in closing, I don't know. This is a real quote. Huffington Post. We'll take it, right? But I'm thinking, this is very flattering, but what does this mean? So, I just did what any of you would do. I went to Meryl Streep, and I said, so what do you think of this? And she said, I don't know what this means. And who are you? And how did you get in here? And now I'm calling security. Thank you very much.
Hello. I was given some tips about this microphone, but I think it's okay where it is. Hi. Welcome. I'm Sloane Crosley, and I also was given this book in a somewhat incomplete form, but a great form. I was given all of these incredible stories of the workplace and asked to help order them and introduce them. And the ordering, I had this brilliant idea, sort of similar to the hope that Chip probably felt. There were originally 12 of them. And so I thought, well, we'll do pairs, because it'll be like copies, because of photocopies, because of Xerox. And that will work very well. And then a 13th essay story came in. And you should still read it, though. It's still very worth reading, and it is not worth naming the person. No, it's fine. So this is the introduction to all these wonderful pieces of fiction about the modern workplace. The thing most people don't take into consideration about the caveman is just how many of them worked in offices. Not all of the cavemen, of course. Some were freelance boar hunters and berry gatherers, or else they whittled clubs with names like Lady Sleeper 3000. But the rest of the cave people woke up every morning, commuted to a different part of the cave, and got to work on a task for which they expected to be rewarded. History has been woefully negligent of these people, but who do you think sorted the sticks and organized the animal teeth? Who do you think saw reindeer trotting across the south of France, and instead of thinking, oh good, food, thought, oh good, visual aids? The planet's first office workers, that's who. The human imperative to produce on a regular basis, to excel and to be of value, is a lot older than we tend to think it is, which means that whatever you do for a living, it's probably closer to the world's oldest profession than what you have long assumed to be the world's oldest profession. Probably. I don't know your life. Thousands of years later, it may be harder to achieve success in the modern world. A couple of loincloths do not a fashion line make. But humans want more or less what we've always wanted, to find our role in life's cave. It's the workplace itself that's evolved. It's the workplace itself that's constantly in flux. And it's the workplace itself that's the focus of the 11 stories in this book. Here, some of today's most talented authors and 2 singer-songwriters come together in a kind of virtual office to ask themselves the same question. What does it mean to get to work now? As it would be in real life, each author has decorated his or her office differently. Some have used fiction, some have used autobiography, some have used poetry. But each story shares a thematic wall with the next, organized in connected chapters, not pairs. This book explores contemporary issues of mentorship, creation, competition, and even boredom. These tales take place on street corners and in classrooms, in parking lots, and genius bars. And because this virtual office is occupied by writers who are rarely in danger of underthinking an issue, there's also plenty of nostalgia, of longing for the days of warm photocopies and nubby carpeting. And they're not alone. Open up the suite of office emojis on your phone. Don't do that right now. None of you. I'm sure you were told to turn them off. Open up the suite of office emojis on your phone, and you'll find a floppy disk, a fountain pen, a push-button phone, and a Rolodex. This is because while we weren't looking, the taste of burnt coffee and the sound of the fax machine jamming merged with our schema of the world. Time curled around the mundane and made it meaningful. Which brings us back to our friends, the cavemen. While they may have had a sense of creating something great in the moment, an especially well-stretched animal hide, say, they surely did not believe that one day their descendants would walk through dark corners and caverns to admire their handiwork. How could they possibly have known? And how can we know what pieces of the modern workplace will stand the test of time? I suspect the vocational legacy we leave behind will be less about the artifacts and more about the array of worlds on display in the narratives you're about to hear. About how we got to work, about how we balanced passion with obligation and creativity with structure. Here is the modern workplace as it lives now in 5, you will hear 5, not 12, in 5 different imaginations. So please, come on in. The meeting's just down the hall in the conference room. They can't start without you. Thank you.
Hello. Sloane went to the wrong podium, so we fired her. She's out. You would just take all of your books out and redact her entirely. My name is Joshua Ferris. It's a great honor to be here. I can't quite see you, but I think the last time that I went to a reading this well-attended, I was probably in church. So it's really wonderful to see you all. Bernard asked that the writers talk briefly about where the ideas for the stuff that we put forth for Speaking of Work came from. And I thought rather than sort of belabor the point, what I would do actually is read a little bit, just briefly, from the novel that I have been working on for 2 or 3 years, because it sort of shows where my connection to Xerox came from, or at least my emotional connection. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with that. It's about 2 pages, fairly brief, and then I'll read from the excerpt in Speaking of Work. My father was never a very mechanical man, and his record of holding down a job was spotty at best. In contrast, his brother Rudy, 3 years his junior, went to college on the GI Bill and was employed as an electrical engineer at crisp, futuristic Xerox Corp, going on 20 years. As an antidote to the anxieties of job hopping and an uncertain paycheck, which had contributed to my parents' divorce, a life in engineering looked unassailable. And so naturally, I enrolled as an engineering student when I went off to college. Electrical engineering, however, didn't sound quite special enough for me when I was 18 years old. In a list of concentrations provided by the engineering school, I located the word biomedical.
a doctor and an engineer, and knew at once that that was for me. What exactly does a biomedical engineer do? Natchez asked me on the day that we found ourselves roommates in Burge Hall. Oh, it's easy, I said. Say you're just coming back from a war, right? And you've had an arm lopped off in battle. A biomedical engineer would make a whole new limb for you using some, applied materials. Like robotics? Some robotics, for sure, absolutely. Robotics, for sure. Sweet, Natch replied. Soon after, I started seeing Lizzie, who lived down the hall from us. Lizzie was learning Cantonese while majoring in dance and played starting forward on the field hockey team. I considered her just about perfect and fell immediately in love. But here, too, I was in over my head, and one Saturday night, I was tested on both fronts when she got off her bed and came back with a bottle of wine. Open this for us, will you, Jake, she said, also handing off a silver corkscrew that seemed to come straight out of my childhood. Sure, I said. But I didn't know how to use a corkscrew any more than I knew how to wield a scalpel or operate a pneumatic wrench. Natchez happened to be in the middle of a story just then, and I focused entirely on him, as if what he were saying was so witty, so transporting that wine would never be necessary ever again. But then he quit talking, and the room filled with a deafening silence. All eyes found their way to me and that wine. Was I going to open it or what? Oh, you know what? I just remembered I forgot something back in the I'll be right back. I handed the wine down to Natchez. I'll get to that right when I get back. I'll be right back. I fled the room. As I hurried down the hallway, I came up with a plan. Someone in this dormitory had to have a corkscrew. I'd find it, make a study of it, learn the how-to, and race back to Lizzie's a born sophisticate and everyone's hero. I went across the hall from our room and knocked on the neighbor's door. She was a cute smile in a twin set who returned a minute later holding a replica of the corkscrew Lizzie had just handed me. I took it down to the communal bathrooms where, locked in a cold stall for the next 10 minutes, I tried to discern its many moving parts. What a mystery it was, the perfect totem of all adult things. It had 2 weird wings, it had a top you could turn, it scissored up and down. But how did all of that work together? And where did one even take hold of the damn thing? I had no idea. Can you believe that? Me, the biomedical engineer. Soldiers returning from war would soon be looking to me to fix them up with their new limbs, and I couldn't even remove a cork from a bottle of wine. I returned the device to my neighbor and walked down to back to Lizzie's in perfect terror. The bottle of wine was open, and they were already sipping it out of solo cups. I flashed Natchez the wallet I claimed to have left behind. Found it, I said. Thank you. I'm expecting another one when I'm done with this. Okay, so this is from the anthology. At that time, I was still living for all-night parties and pop-up locations across Brooklyn and Queens. The flagrant illegality of those wobbly structures was more likely to get you killed than the impromptu mosh pits or pharmaceutical interactions found therein. I partied in water towers, grain silos, abandoned garages. I tranced through houses on duckboards, crowd surfed with strangers in old churches, went head first into steel beams while the young men on stage whiplashed their hair and bled into microphones. I was never alone in those years. Though no, I can't remember anyone's name but Cubby Dexter's. Even their faces are lost in nostalgia in the blur of the crowd. Cubby and I would begin the evening with a breakfast of burritos and cheap beer. By the time we were headed out to the main event, the subway car had drained of the doctors and executives and taken on an air of carnival. We soaked our shirts through in hollowed-out lofts and screamed ourselves mute and somehow came through it all sober, high only on adrenaline by then and the end times energy of 4 a.m. We seemed to be getting more out of life than your average Dan. We knew intimately the deserted dawn hour when the steel doors opened out from the condemned building under Brooklyn's gray ramparts, the single-use D'Agostino bags fluttering in the barbed wires, the opioid addicts on the park benches, the early joggers lighting out for the water. Depletion and contentment marked those sun-bright evenings, as did the body's need for breakfast. Cubby and I and the others sat in Caribbean diners with our ears ringing, hoarse and witless, and eating everything in sight. An hour later, we were off to our temp jobs and fashion classes, or to home in bed. There was a little magic to every day, a little unlikely charm, a fillip in the belly that had me convinced that life was only worth living this way. The friends, the fucking, the drugs, the drag-assing, the suffocating poverty, the chill, the thrill, the 5 a.m. grime. Wasn't this why I'd quit graduate school and why I'd come to the city? Wasn't this how we hoped to avoid regret? America wasn't just the promise of OEM scanners and SKUs. It was the jam band in the basement and the years lost to youth. But then I lost Cubby. Cubby was never cut out for that kind of lifestyle. The hours took their toll, as did the pills, the constant yank and jerk of coming up and going down. Cubby got sad, lost focus, withdrew. It was hard for him to remember the night the water main broke and we raved to Detroit techno in an icy cold stream, or how we sat shirtless on pallets of cinder block watching the rising sun compete with the bonfire. What was he cut out for? What was Cubby Dexter equipped with in life? His mom was in jail, his father unknown. He had no college degree, no skill set or vocation. He was battered by poverty. He was falling apart with diabetes. His hand shook like an old man's. It was never a surprise to find Cubby on the kitchen floor desperately trying to regulate his insulin with a bowl of Fruit Loops and tap water. He couldn't afford to eat well. He was on a steady diet of moon pies and Mountain Dew. Then he'd drop off to sleep for whole days. He lost his job babysitting, lost his girlfriend Jolene, lost his direction completely. His crying jags carried on and on. I find him prone in corners on stairwells. I'd come up from a day's loading, and there he'd be again. And do you know finally how helpless I was? Cubby, I'd say. And not knowing what else to do, I'd just curl up with him. I'd curl up with this grown man, this little boy beaten by the big city and his own bad choices, so that he'd know that somebody loved him. Someone, and I was the world, wanted him to survive. But he was not made for the world, and he leapt free of the footpath on the Brooklyn Bridge and threw himself into traffic. I had girlfriends, I had jobs. There were abrupt changes in scene, but Cubby in a camo kilt and a dope new pair of shoes was my one constant. Before he killed himself, Cubby committed 9 songs to a 4-track and then refused to upload them to the internet. It was a piece of genius, I thought, but it wasn't for public consumption. It was for the 4 walls in Cubby's bedroom and 12 fortunate others. For Cubby transferred this delicate and strange acoustic opus to a dozen cassette tapes and handed them out selectively, sometimes stupidly, as when he gave one unprompted to a hot dog vendor in Prospect Park. He never sold one, never promoted the album, never even talked about the damn thing. He'd just take a shine to someone and hand off another unlabeled cassette tape. One more in a limited series, gone. I listened to Cubby's album then, and I listen to it now. Had I his talent, I'd have followed a different path in life. I'd have banged on doors and never taken no for an answer. Eventually, I let that album fall by the wayside. A few years went by, and I found it again, put it on heavy rotation. Couldn't believe what he'd done. The next time I rediscovered it 2 years later, I'd cleaned up my act. I was working at Hedges & Bulk. It was impossible to find a player. I transferred the tape to CD, something he'd never have done on his own. He was just sorry he'd played the guitar. He wanted to be a poet. Instead, he was my private Leonard Cohen. He was my secret and sacred prayer. I took over for Jim Sandy Dawn. I bought an apartment and a building. I moved all my CDs over to digital files later than everyone else. Cubby's bootleg was lost among 42,000 other digital items. But when, during a dinner party or midday at Hedges & Bulk, Cubby came up on shuffle, invariably people would go quiet and say, "Who is this?" I might have told them, but I never did. It was too important. It was too private. I hoarded Cubby. I kept them all to myself. Then we flew to Atlanta to pitch a data capture firm with a market cap of $3 billion. We stopped into Starbucks for an afternoon pick-me-up. And going in, the furthest thing from my mind, being Cubby Dexter, I gave the homeless man my spare change. Why not? He'd held the door open for us. I was standing with Widener. We were creeping forward in line. We were debating the wisdom of going public, when in among the mints and the macaroons and the Tony Bennett duets, I came across Cubby Dexter's Black Heather. It was no longer an obscurity on cassette tape, but a slickly packaged 2-disc set with an essay inside, penned by John Jeremiah Sullivan. The essay recounted the album's history from obscure cult recording to wide German phenomenon to the top of the Hot 100. I stood there stunned. There was Cubby, back from the dead, and on sale at the Starbucks. And as something inside me passed out of this earth forever. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Ames, and so we were told to explain why we wrote what we wrote, and I spoke to Bernard on the phone, and a month later, I knew I had to write the piece, and all I recalled from the conversation was that I had to set a story in an office. I sort of learned tonight that maybe the workplace was more of the prompt. But anyway, I was like, okay, set a story in an office. And I thought, sorry to curse, I thought, shit, I haven't had a job in years. And I don't know what goes on in offices. But I've been in psychoanalysis for a few years, and I thought, well, that's an office I know, and so then I thought that's the direction to go in, and then the other thing is, I hadn't written prose in years. I'd been only writing for television for like the last 7 years, and I thought, I don't know how to write prose anymore, so I thought maybe I could write a teleplay and about a psychoanalytic office. And so that's how I came to write what I wrote, which I'm now going to read to you. And this story is called, and so it's going to be a little difficult to read because it's written in screenplay form. So when the characters are speaking, I'm just going to shift my body subtly like that, and yeah, okay, it seemed like a bright audience. So you'll get it, and again, I don't know how this is going to read out loud because, like I said, it's a screenplay. So okay. The depressed, the tormented, and the sexually disturbed. A short story told in the form of a teleplay. So that's the title. Okay. Exterior, Manhattan Building, day, mid-October. Establishing shot of an impressive Upper East Side 4-story building made of white Italianate stone. The building is on a cross street in the low 90s between Madison Avenue and Fifth Avenue. After the establishing shot, we zoom in on the building's entrance, a thick black door with a golden knob, until the camera rests in close-up on a brass plate which is next to the door and reads, Rubenstein Psychoanalytic Institute for the Depressed and the Tormented. Below that, in parentheses, are the following etched words. We also cater to the sexually disturbed, because who isn't? So don't be shy. Ring the bell. Help awaits. Inside. That's right. Ring the bell. You can do it. We already believe in you. We do. Ring the bell. Below the brass plate is a doorbell. Just then a man in his late 40s, 49 to be precise, crosses frame, and we follow him as he walks past the black door. He seems to glance briefly at the brass plate, but keeps going. During this opening scene, jaunty classical music will be playing as score, but by the end, the music will become frantic, as it often does in classical pieces, the mood of the music changing like the sky or like our own emotions. The man's wearing brown corduroy pants, a gray tweed blazer, and a blue Oxford shirt. He's bald, except for a close-cropped ring of fading reddish hair around the back of his head, arranged in the classic horseshoe configuration that has plagued bald men since the Roman Empire, if not before. The camera follows the horseshoe, but then the man stops, pretends as if he just had a thought, and touches his chin. Then he looks to his right and left, seeing if anyone notices him. No one does. He's alone for the moment on the sidewalk. Sorry, I'm moving this glass of water. Okay, sorry. He's alone for a moment on the sidewalk, a few feet past the door, and then he doubles back and quickly reads the brass plate, mouthing, the depressed and the tormented, the sexually disturbed. He then looks to his right and left, checking once again if anyone has seen him. No one has. And then suddenly, like a cartoon character, he takes off sprinting in the direction of Fifth Avenue. As the man runs away, his form receding, he turns left in slapstick fashion onto Fifth Avenue and disappears with the camera resting on the green forest of Central Park straight ahead. From the forest, we go to black. We then wait 2 beats, then there's a cry-on that reads, 2 days later. Then that disappears, and we are back at the front door to the building. Exterior Manhattan Building Day, 2 days later. People are walking past the door and the brass plate. The lighting is different. It's a different time of day. Then the man from 2 days earlier appears. He's dressed in similar clothes, but he's also wearing a cap to provide anonymity. I'm going to do a little prop. Okay. The man's name is Jonathan, though he's not related per se to the author of this script. Though keep in mind that Freud said all writing is a form of confession. Jonathan bends down to tie his shoes even though he's wearing loafers. He mimes the action of shoe tying while people cross in front of him. When all the people are gone and there's a lull in the foot traffic, he hops up, glances at the brass plate, looks to his left and right, and then pushes the doorbell. Almost instantaneously, causing him to jump, the door buzzes. The lock has been released. Jonathan fumbles with the door, but the buzzing continues, and he's able to open the door and enter. Then there's a description of an elevator ride. Skip that. Okay. Interior reception area of the Rubenstein Psychoanalytic Institute for the Depressed and the Tormented Day continuous. Jonathan enters the reception area. Directly in front of him is a rather stout and powerful woman, the receptionist, who sits behind a large old desk. In the corner is a door that must lead to somewhere. The receptionist is in her late 60s with an old-fashioned bosom that seems limitless and to comprise most of her torso. Her well-dyed golden brown hair is in an unusual vertical bun above her head, twisting upwards like a challah. I put that in specifically for the Y. On small side tables, instead of magazines, there are books and pamphlets by Freud. All the furniture seems to be from a different time. It's of the past. There are 3 chairs for patients waiting. Receptionist, hello there. Come in, young man. Jonathan is middle-aged and bald with hysterical digestion, but he does feel like a young man. But he's anxious at being at the Rubenstein Psychoanalytic Institute. He's frozen in place in front of the elevator. The receptionist naturally notices this and says sweetly, come in, dear boy. Tell me why you're here. Responsive to the commands of others and naturally obedient, Jonathan takes 3 steps and he's in front of the desks. He removes his cap like Oliver Twist and stammers, well, you see, I was on the street and I was intrigued and, well, I see I've always been in a lot of pain, but you're interested in psychoanalysis, is that it? Yes. And you feel stuck in life and incapable of change. Jonathan, beat, looks down, then up with bashful eyes. Yes, very much so. Receptionist, I'll not say the names again. And you repeat destructive patterns of behavior and destructive patterns of thinking and don't feel like a real human being much of the time? Yes, all of that. Good. Have a seat. My husband, Dr. Schwartz-Gelsen, will evaluate you in a few minutes. Schwartz-Gelsen? Yes, I'm Schwartz, he's Gelsen. I see. Well, have a seat. He's been waiting for you. But I just got here. He's always waiting for the next patient, and you're the next patient. Have a seat. She smiles, gestures to the chairs, and he starts to head over. She presses a button on an intercom box, says into it, Jonathan is here. Jonathan turns at his name, smiles, sits down, and just as he sits, the door in the corner flies open, and a very short, old black man emerges, wearing a tweed 3-piece suit and tie. This is Dr. Schwartz-Gelsen, and he bellows, Jonathan, so good to see you. Jonathan, shocked at the bellowing, though having just sat, jettisons to his feet, clutching his hat. The rhythm of this should all be quite rapid. Receptionist speaks into the intercom, Jonathan sits, the door flies open, the doctor bellows, and Jonathan bolts upward. All right, then the doctor kisses the receptionist rather passionately, comes over to Jonathan, shakes his hand, leads him through the office. There was a lot of description of an office now, and where there's like 12 psychoanalytic cubicles, or maybe 6, or maybe it's 12, I don't recall. And with analysts and analysans, Jonathan's taken down all the way down this corridor through these other offices to the doctor's office. I'll skip all that and just get into the interview to see if Jonathan is ready for psychoanalysis. And then Jonathan asks something, the doctor explains something about the institute where they got the money from. The patriarch Rubinstein had made a fortune in liquor stores and parking lots, and psychoanalysis had helped him with chronic 30-year bout of diarrhea. I'm just sorry to be gross. And anyway, founded this institute. Anyway, and so then Jonathan says, "That's incredible. Well, if I do this, if you think I'm a candidate, how often will I have to come here?" 4 times a week for 50-minute sessions. And the average analysis lasts about 5 years, but many go longer. So you're looking at somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 sessions. Jonathan closes his eyes and puts his hands over his face, even though it's free, because it's a free institute. What a commitment. Dr. Schwartz-Gelsen responds to this nonverbal gesture. "It takes time, Jonathan, to effect change. Human beings are very stubborn. Would you like to be able to change?" Jonathan takes his hands away from his face, opens his eyes. "Yes, I want to change. I want to grow up before my life is over." "Excellent. Let's get started then." The doctor readies his pen and steno pad. "I'm just going to ask a few painless questions." "Okay. How long were you breastfed?" "I thought you said the questions would be painless." "Answer the question." "I was nursed for only 2 weeks and I'm still upset about it." "So you're a breast man, been questing for the nipple ever since?" "Yes." Jonathan smiles weakly, a bit ashamed. "Don't be embarrassed. I'm also a breast man. You may have guessed as much when you met my wife, Ruth." "Ruth? Mrs. Schwartz-Gelsen. Oh, yes, of course. Right. Sorry. Are you married?" "No." "Are you single?" "Yes." "Would you like a companion?" "Yes." "Do you feel capable of love?" I'm not sure." "Do you like to eat in or go out?" "Go out." "Right." The doctor looks down at his pad and writes what we hear him muttering to himself, which is the first time he has scribbled something, and we can see on the pad what he writes down. Doctor muttering, "Likes to go out." "And how often do you think of suicide?" "What?" Beat, then in a whisper, lowering his head, "Often." "Are you going to hurt yourself today, after you leave here?" Jonathan looks up vulnerable. "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes, it's always just in my mind. I could never actually do it. I would never want to hurt my mother that way. She's 80. Promise you won't hurt yourself." "I promise." "Can I trust you on this?" "Yes, you can trust me." "Good, I believe you. Do you have a dog?" "Yes." "What's the dog's name?" "Louis." Dr. Schwartz then slams the steno pad shut with a big smile on his face as if hearing the name Louis clinched the deal. "Well, that's it. You're a prime candidate for analysis. Congratulations." Jonathan excited, "Really?" Dr. Schwartz-Gelsen, "Yes, you're about to begin an incredible adventure. Freud called it the talking cure for a reason. You will talk yourself into wellness, tapping into your own innate wisdom, and you'll have the chance to know the one person who has been such a mystery to you all along, yourself." So that's all I will read. And then I just want to say the next reader was my professor quite a while ago, and it's an honor to read with her, and so Joyce Carol Oates, and so in her honor, I'm going to make a sound that my friends and I would make on the playground when being attacked by more normal children, and it's known as the Harry call. I'll do one without the assistance of a mic, and then Joyce will come out. This is the Harry call. I'll do 3.
Well, that was unique. I was going to say, when I planned to come out here and take credit for Jonathan Ames, who had been my student at Princeton just a few years ago, actually, 3 or 4 years ago. I had planned to take credit, but I'm sort of rethinking that. Well, I am Joyce Oates. I have to sort of confess that. Oh, no. It's been such a great pleasure and an honor to be involved in this distinguished project with its goal, the furthering of global literacy under the auspices of the iconic Xerox Corporation. When Bernard Schwartz invited me to write an original prose piece to celebrate the workplace, I was thrilled to say yes immediately. And my immediate response was to write a story quite quickly, titled with no ambiguity, The Happy Place. For to me, a teacher for many years, despite the evidence of Jonathan Ames, for me, a teacher for many years, is that teaching is the happy place. I will read a page-and-a-half excerpt, which is a story that's like autofiction. It's not exactly me, it's sort of a composite of experiences, but it is fiction. Just a page and a half about a professor who becomes fascinated by a mysterious first-year student at a university not unlike Princeton, actually. Professor, hello. White winter days, sunshine and newly fallen snow. You have come to the happy place when it is Thursday afternoon. Another week and you're still alive. Your secret you carry everywhere and so into the happy place. So close to the heart, no one will see. Not a happy season, not a happy time, not in the history of the world and not in the personal lives of many. Yet, in the wood-paneled seminar room on the 5th floor of North Hall, at the top of the smooth-worn wooden staircase, where a leaded window overlooks a stand of juniper pines. In the wind, pine boughs shiver and flash with melted snow. The happy place. Here is an atmosphere of optimism, light as helium. You laugh often, you and the undergraduates spaced about the polished table. Well, why do you laugh so much? You wondered. Generally, it seems the more serious the subjects, the more likely some sort of laughter. The more intensity, the more laughter. The more at stake, the more laughter. The happy place is the solace, the promise. Waking in the morning, stunned to be still alive, the profound fact of your life now. I should say parenthetically that the professor has suffered a great loss, and her personal life has been devastated, and so she looks to her teaching and her workplace as consolation. Already at the first class meeting in September, you noticed her, Anna. Of the 12 students in the fiction writing workshop, it is Anna who holds herself apart from the others. When they laugh, Anna does not laugh, not often. When they answer questions you put to them, when in their enthusiasm, they talk over one another like puppies tumbling together, Anna sits silent, though Anna may look on with a faint, melancholy smile. Or Anna may turn her gaze toward the wall of windows, casting a ghostly reflected light onto her face and seem to be staring into space, oblivious of her surroundings. Thinking her own thoughts, private, not yours to know. You feel an impulse to lean across the table to touch Anna's wrist, to smile at her and ask, Anna, is something wrong? But what would you dare ask this girl who holds herself apart from her classmates? Are you troubled, unhappy, distracted, bored? Not possible. One of the others in the seminar might take Anna aside to ask such questions, but you, the adult in the room, the professor, don't have that right, nor would you exercise that right if indeed it were yours. Still less should you touch Anna's wrist. It is a very thin wrist, the wrist of a child. The young woman's face is delicately boned, pale, smooth as porcelain. Her eyes are beautiful and thick-lashed, but somewhat shadowed and evasive. You have noticed around Anna's slender neck a thin gold chain with a small gold cross. Indeed, Anna is a very diminutive young woman. To the casual eye, she would seem more likely 14 than 18, and hardly a woman at all. You see, without actually having noticed until now, that she wears loose-fitting clothing, a shapeless pullover several sizes too large, and the thought comes to you that Anna may be acutely thin. Her diffident manner makes her appear even smaller, as if she might curl up, disappear, cast no shadow. How vulnerable Anna appears. To gaze upon her is to feel that you must protect her. You have thought, is she a refugee? For her spoken English is hesitant and imperfect. You have not wanted to think, is she a victim? Has she been hurt? What is the sorrow in her face? Why is she so unlike the others? Anna's face that seems wise beyond her years. Oh, why does Anna not smile? Why is it Anna who alone resists the happy place? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Alain Mabanckou, French and Congolese novelist, living in California and teaching French literature and African literature as well. So the last time, since I'm a big fan of the basketball, I read a tweet from Eric Bledsoe. He's from Phoenix Suns. He said, "I don't want to be here." Come on, I want to be here with you because it's very important to set the page together. So it's a great, great honor to be here participating in such a great project. My piece is entitled The Miraculous Hand, La Main Miraculeuse. It's written in French. Actually, it may be a true story. It's about my uncle, who had a great office in France, in front of the Eiffel Tower, working there, nice office, and one day he decided to go back to the Congo, but unfortunately, he lost everything. So I wrote it between what I was writing at that time. It was my novel when I was called by Bernard, letting me know that we have a huge mission to save the world. So that's what I did at that time, and I came here to save the world, even if my stone is so small, but it's gonna be listened to throughout the world. So I don't wanna bother your ears with my reading in English. That's why I'm undercovered. I brought someone who is well-known, more well-known because I watched the movie, The Wire, Michael Potts, who is here. Great American actor. So when I was told that he's going to read my piece, I said that, come on, you should have told me. I would have tried to call everybody in Congo to let them know that a brother is taking things in charge. That's good. Thank you very much for reading it. So I'm going to give you just a test in French, since I wrote in French. I'm going to read just a page and a half in French, and then the master are going to take the things in charge. Quand j'occupais encore le poste de directeur de ressources humaines à Paris, j'avais à moi tout seul un vaste bureau au 10e étage d'un immeuble moderne dans le 7e arrondissement de Paris, près du Champ de Mars. Ce bureau avait une vue sur la tour Eiffel et j'étais fier de me mettre debout devant l'immense fenêtre vitrée d'où j'observais les touristes du monde entier visiter ce monument historique édifié en 1889 par Gustave Eiffel à l'époque où on célébrait le 100e anniversaire de la Révolution française. Quel autre bureau parisien aurait pu être mieux situé que le mien? Il me fallait donc être à la hauteur de ce privilège. Pour cela, j'étais toujours habillé en costume et cravate, les chaussures cirées, les cheveux rasés de près. J'avais entre les mains un attaché-case noir en cuir et alourdi par les dossiers que je commençais à traiter depuis ma voiture. Mon chauffeur s'empressait de m'ouvrir la porte et me disait « Bonne journée de travail, monsieur le directeur. Aussitôt que j'entrais dans le hall de l'immeuble de notre société, on me disait également bonjour avec déférence, et moi je penchais légèrement la tête et esquissais un petit sourire. Puis j'appuyais sur le bouton de l'ascenseur qui me conduisait jusqu'au 10e étage. Je longeais ensuite un immense couloir, saluant au passage mes collaborateurs et m'arrêtant quelques minutes à l'accueil pour consulter la liste de mes rendez-vous avant d'aller discuter dans mon bureau avec mes secrétaires, 2 Françaises que j'avais recrutées dès qu'elles avaient terminé leur master en relations publiques. Au fond, si je les avais choisies, c'était aussi parce qu'elles sortaient de l'université de Paris-Dauphine dans le 16e arrondissement où j'étais moi-même étudiant 20 ans plus tôt. Le grand maître.
Good evening. Hopefully I can make it sound as mellifluous as that, but I will attempt. When I still held the position of the Director of Human Resources at the Suez Group in Paris, I had a large private office on the 10th floor in a modern building in the 7th arrondissement near the Champs de Mars. The office had a view of the Eiffel Tower, and I was proud to stand in front of the huge glazed window watching tourists from all over the world visit this historical monument. What other Parisian office was better located than mine? I had to live up to the privilege. I always dress in a suit and tie with polished shoes and trimmed hair. I carried a black leather briefcase weighed down by the files that I had already started working on during the morning commute. My driver would hasten to open the door and say, "Have a good day, Monsieur Directeur," as soon as I got out. The moment I entered the lobby, I was greeted with further deference, and I nodded my head slightly and offered a faint smile. I was one of the most respected people in my field. People were intimidated as soon as they crossed the threshold of my office, perhaps because of the red carpet that covered the 150 square meters of space designated exclusively for me. The walls were painted sky blue, which seemed, and this was no small feat, to have a relaxing effect on the seriousness of my work. Hiring the right people for the right positions, but also announcing to fathers or mothers that they would no longer be a part of the company and that a termination procedure had been initiated against them. Yes, the Director of Human Resources is a cold monster, a killer without remorse, a chainsaw with sharp teeth, a man or a woman whose job is to take all the blame. It is for this reason that he must have a sizable office, so that whoever enters for a job interview or for notification of a termination procedure does not feel concerned, as if caught in a trap. After 2 decades at the Suez Group, I felt like I belonged to a real family. I was satisfied, especially with my office, for which I had requested an expansion, whose renovation would be according to my own design. I arranged a round wooden table in the middle of the room for meetings with my team. The walls were decorated with paintings that I had bought all over the world during my professional travels. A fully stocked refrigerator allowed my guests to feel comfortable when I offered them a fresh beer or Perrier. The large sofa, placed just the right distance from the fridge, was one of the things I liked the most, and I'd unwind there before afternoon appointments. At around 2 p.m., I'd prepare coffee with cream in the lovely Nespresso machine that my colleagues gave me on my 15th anniversary with the company. On a long wooden sideboard, I had placed African statuettes, many from Central Africa. On this table, there were also shells and my collection of exotic insects from Madagascar and the Comoros. I preferred to work either on the sofa or at the round table where I had the best view of the Eiffel Tower and the planes crossing the sky. I did this type of work for over 20 years, and I was still doing it in Paris until last month. But then Congo's finance minister came to see me without scheduling an appointment. I agreed to receive him and his advisors because it's not every day that a minister shows up. He paced around my office, admiring my works of art and flipping through a few books in my library. Then he got to the heart of the matter. "You are likely wondering, my dear René Masango, the reason for my visit. Minister, I will not presume to ask, but you will understand that I am surprised to receive such an honor. Well, I will get to the point." He took a breath and continued, "Your place is not here in Paris, Monsieur Mabanckou. We need your expertise back home. Your experience will be very useful in the development of our national electricity company." The minister expressed regret that most African executives no longer return home. Before leaving, he handed me his business card and said, "Think about my proposal carefully, dear René Mabanckou, and call me if you really love your country and you are tired of working for another nation." I phoned my parents in the Congo. My father and mother were thrilled at the idea that I might come back to Pointe-Noire. My younger sister had a different opinion. "What will you do in the Congo? You'd be crazy to give up everything in France, where you're even in charge of white people. Don't come back here, please." But I could not stop thinking about the minister's proposal. I could not sleep. I phoned him, and after talking for half an hour, I gave him a definitive answer. I would resign from the Suez Group to go to work for the National Electricity Company of the Congo. The Suez Group, for its part, tried to keep me, but I was more and more enthusiastic about being of service to my countrymen. I left everything behind, which was not so complicated since I am still single, without children, without even a girlfriend at the age of 45. But this is the path I have chosen, and it would take too long to explain it all here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. How am I going to follow that? Like, they were pretty good, weren't they? Thank you. And it seems like we are explaining our inspiration for what we did and then reading some of it, both of which give me a huge problem because I really didn't have an inspiration for doing this. What happened was I got an email from the 92nd Street Y saying, "Do you want to do this?" And I just love this place. I love the 92nd Street Y. It's a fixture in my version of the city, and so if they want something, I'll do it. Also, it presented, I thought, it presented me with a unique possibility that will never, ever happen again, I'm certain. It would put me in the same book as Roxane Gay. I'm a huge fan of Roxane's, and I thought there is no possible other way that she and I could ever be in a book together, so I was going to do it, even though I have really never had a proper job, so I know nothing about the workplace whatsoever. I sort of missed that part of the specification because I remember saying, yes, I'll do it, and I thought, there was a day when I was free, I thought I'll write it that day, but I couldn't remember what it was supposed to be about. So my story is kind of offbeat, and I will read some of it, although, like I say, I usually do not read. I can read. I've been able to read for a number of years, and although, truthfully, once I was on a radio show, and the format of the radio show, part of it, one segment, the person who was on the show had to make 3 statements about themselves, 2 true and 1 untrue. And the radio listeners then had to call in and guess which was the untrue statement. And so I gave them 2 true statements that were unlikely but absolutely true, and just to sort of be a bit of a red herring. And then I said, due to a very rare learning disability, I was unable to read until I was 36 years old. And nobody picked that one out as the untrue statement. So we'll give it a go. And partly also because now I have to wear reading glasses, and that is very, it just makes me feel old. But anyway, here goes. My story is called, well, I did remember that somebody mentioned the word workplace, and so I did write down My rules, my workplace. Or maybe it was the other way around, my workplace, my rules. But that's how I started planning the story, and that is the title, My Rules. And it starts like this. As planned, I visited 3 bars near Washington Square, and as expected, I came away satisfied. After that, I walked west into the quiet afternoon, and on the stroke of 3 o'clock, I turned into Barrow Street, which was silent and deserted. No one was up yet, too early. No doubt times have changed since then. Now, I'm sure they buy apartments for $1 million, maybe $2 million. Now, I'm sure they work all day to pay the note. But way back long ago in the times I'm talking about, the residents of Barrow Street didn't do much of anything at all. Certainly never before 8 or 10 in the evening. Hence, currently silent and deserted. Slumber was continuing. I was all alone. There was no sound. I could have been in Kansas. Until 2 guys walked in the other way. Lost, I assumed. No other reason for them to be there. Not in that historical era. They were dressed in pinstripe suits, dark blue, with snowy starched shirts and silk neckties cinched tight. One guy was maybe 50 and the other was maybe 30. Maybe a partner and an associate, or a bank president and a favored VP, that kind of dynamic. The older guy had pale eyebrows and colorless blonde hair going gray. Right there and then, I bet on the weekends he wore pink pants and went to the Hamptons. That kind of guy probably had a sailboat. The 30-year-old was shorter and squatter and had a head of oiled black hair. On a bathroom scale, he would have outweighed his boss by 20 pounds or more, but the older guy was in charge. That was clear. He was a beaky, patrician kind of character. Authority was coming off him like a smell. I figured they had come north from Wall Street to get a private lunch away from prying eyes, probably because they had important matters to discuss. I figured the older guy's wife had picked out the restaurant. Word of mouth from a neighbor, or a mention in a hip magazine. Probably the 2 guys had been unimpressed. Now they had forgotten where their car was parked. Hence their random turn into silent and deserted Barrow Street. No other reason, nothing for them there, or for me, or for anyone. Or maybe there was. They were arguing. I saw it clearly when they got close. The older guy was moving as awkward as a stilt walker, and the younger guy was all seized up with frustration. He was stumping along as rigid as a mannequin. I heard him hiss something about a grandfather, and I heard the older guy hiss something back, and for a second I wondered if they were related, father and son maybe, arguing over a legacy. But ultimately I thought not. They were too close in age and too far apart in appearance. Gentlemen, I said, may I help you with something? The older guy seemed to find nothing weird about the question. A guy like that got asked greasy questions all the time. He lived in a world of doormen and bellhops and maitre d's and valet parkers and secretaries and assistants. Perhaps he thought the village employed concierges, standing ready to render services, if required, to people just like him. My appearance helped the illusion. As always, I was dressed in a dull suit, unremarkable and anonymous. It was neat, but a little worn and faded, a little shiny at the knees and elbows, just like a person would wear who worked a hotel lobby 5 days a week. The older guy looked at me but said nothing at first. He was trying to hide how mad he was. That kind of old-fashioned character never washed his linens in public, wasn't raised that way. Then he saw how he might score a subtle point. He said, we're looking for the garage on Sullivan Street. My colleague insists it's in this direction. I knew the place he meant. It had a big sign and a guy with an orange flag. He was supposed to wave people in. In reality, most of the time he sat in the sunshine in a folding chair and now and then twitched his flag like a cow flicking flies with its tail. Sullivan Street was in the opposite direction entirely. Let me guess, I said, you ate at that new French place. As a matter of fact, we did, the older guy said, politely enough, in a measured cadence, but through tight lips and ground teeth. He was still angry. Did you like it? I asked. Not much, the younger guy said. They served us pig's cheeks. which I guess was a subtle score of his own, if in fact his boss's wife had indeed recommended the place, which I was sure she had. They wouldn't have relied on a secretary or an assistant's assistant, not if they wanted to be off the record and away from prying eyes. I said, "I'm afraid Sullivan Street is not in this direction." The younger guy looked down at the sidewalk. His opening bit about the pig's cheeks had been countered by his own geographical error. He was back level, like 30 all in tennis. Disappointing, but his own fault. "You must have gotten turned around," I said. "Maybe you were preoccupied." He didn't answer. His boss said to me, "Just tell us how to get to Sullivan Street." "That was my intention," I said. "Now I'm not sure I should." Thank you very much. And now, please welcome to the stage, on behalf of Xerox, Tony Clayton-Hine.
Thank you all. What an evening, and what an incredible honor to have the contributions of these amazing authors. Please, one more round of applause for them. As you see, amazing things can happen when you set the page free. So please make sure you take an opportunity to download the book. If you go to setthepagefree.com, you'll see a free ebook. And tonight was just a portion of what you see in the book and the content around Speaking of Work, a story of love, suspense, and paperclips. So one last time, I'd like to very much thank the 92nd Street Y, the writers, the artists, and all of the contributors who made this project possible. And thank you all for your attendance tonight.